Hey everyone, Danny Danzy here, and I've been asked quite a few times to give you some production notes and stuff about, tribulations and the way I do things, and so I'm going to do that before I get into, playing and showing you how I played the songs and all. But I've had some really cool, recording questions, and I think it's really important to go over some of that in the event that I can help some of you out. So what this video is going to entail is my two greatest epiphanies to getting into recording and actually having something sound decent for a change. So real fast, just to backtrack a little bit, Somewhere Lost in Time, when I did that record, I didn't know what I was doing. So to this day I cringe when I hear it. I love the songs, just the production is just, it's somebody that didn't know what they were doing, that did the best they could. And thankfully the record company liked it. We sold a few copies, thank God, and that paved the way for what was to come. But I wanted to do better than that, so I made sure on the second record I had people playing with me, help me write, and we recorded it in another studio. So I didn't have anything to do with Danzyland other than I did record some of the instruments. I recorded all the guitars here, all the acoustic guitars I recorded here, except for I think the guitars on What About Us. And Wayne Davis did a great job, pretty much mixing, and I produced it with him, and I would listen and say, nah, change that, I don't like that, let's do this. So the strange thing was I could sit in Wayne's studio and listen to something, and I knew it was wrong, I knew how to fix it, yet in my own I couldn't do that, which is why we didn't do the record there. I just wasn't happy with my production, and my abilities at the time really weren't even abilities. I had a long way to go, but yet I knew in my head, I just didn't know, I couldn't hear what I was supposed to hear because things weren't translating right. I had just NS10s, I didn't have a sub, I started mixing through headphones. It's just the wrong approach to try to get good quality. So I said, you know what, my studio's a little pre-production studio, that's what I'm going to use it for, track ideas. Let's go to Wayne, he knows what he's doing. And he did. He showed me a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot from Wayne. He was really good at what he did. So but after that I started to learn and really get into this stuff. And the one thing I found out is, the first epiphany is you get what you print. Anytime you record, you want to go for the best sound that you can get. None of this, I'll fix it in the mix, or, creating sounds inside your recording. You don't want to do that, all right? The best songs are the ones where the print stands by itself, okay? So, for example, if I were to strip everything off of my album, all the effects, and just play the music the way it is, no reverbs, no delays, no compression, you're still going to be left with a killer album. It might not have the punch that it has with the effects, and the extra bells and whistles, but you'll recognize the songs and you're going to get the same feeling out of it, okay? So that's super important. That was Epiphany 1, which I really have always been an advocate of getting the sound right, I find that if you spend 30 minutes or more trying to tweak a sound, it's probably not a good sound. And that's another thing. As you go through time and you learn this stuff, you learn what justifies a good sound or a bad sound. You know when to trash a sound and start over, or when you get one right, you just know, or that, okay, when I get in, all I have to do is do a little high pass or a little low pass, and this is going to be great, a little compression, let it fly. I'm not sitting there using a million plugins. I have quite a few. I mean, in this field, it's like a mechanic having a toolbox that has all the right stuff. You want to have all the right stuff, just in case, not just for me, but for the other people, that I work with. So I think it's really important to, have a wide array of tools, and, there is no plug-in that fixes everything, but I am going to show you one, which brings me to Epiphany 2, that changed my world and allowed me to have a studio and a business and, all that stuff. And, it helped me to give you the sound that you hear in Tribulations. So, I want to talk about that. I want to show you a project of mine, and we're going to look at one of my songs and see what's actually in there. What does it look like inside of a Danny Danzy song? What are you doing? So I won't go in great depth, but I just want to kind of show you. I didn't go crazy with effects and processing, and there's a lot, but it's not as much as you would think. There are some tracks that are untouched, or some tracks I'll send a bunch of instruments to one bus, and that bus might be processed. So, the drums are usually the biggest thing, but there is a plugin that was the turning point for me, and that's what I want to get to. And so let's take a look at one of my mixes and see, what's going on in there. So I'm going to change cameras and see if I can get this thing right here, and we'll go from there. So I'm inside of a project. I'm in Sonar, and I'm looking at Where Do We Go, which is off the Tribulations album. And I just want to kind of go through and show you what's going on, and we're going to get to this Magic plugin. All right. Actually, before we get into there, let's take a look at the Magic plugin. So, one of the big issues that people have is they're constantly EQing. Every time they do something, they're EQing like crazy. They might work on a mix for a week or two, or sometimes a month. I've been there. I've done it. I've struggled, and the reason being is what I'm going to show you. All right. So, this is the plugin. It's Arc by IK Multimedia. This is an older version. They're up to 3 now. But I actually had a little endorsement with them. I did some beta testing, and I was a big advocate for Arc 1 and 2. I didn't get the third one because I don't need it. This is everything that I need. So let's explain what's happening in your world, okay? So, for example, on my Atom A7s, which is on my main rig, you don't need a big, huge speaker system. All right, you don't need to go out and spend millions of dollars. The system you have is probably good enough. I do recommend a sub. I think a sub is essential because most near fields, you're not going to hear those sub-low frequencies like they claim that they can get. You just get a sub, you play it safe. You know how much low end you're dealing with at all times. It's very important, in my opinion. But if you look at what's happening here, the orange line was what I had. Now, my Atom A7s are a little bass heavy. Meaning, if I were to mix without room correction on there, okay, I would be taking bass out of my mix. And then when I go play it in a car and I play it somewhere else, it wouldn't sound right. That was one of the, the cool things, cool comments that I got. A friend of mine, Greg Reed, had said, hey, man, one thing I notice about your stuff is it sounds good everywhere you play it. And I thank you for that. That's one of the best compliments I can receive, And I went for that. I tried really hard to deliver that type of thing, and I think it's super important that we try to translate everywhere as good as we can. And this plugin helped me to achieve that, right? So if you look here, the orange lines are what my Atom A7s did right out of the box. So you see that's all that low end? I'm going to pull that right out in the mix. And then you're going to listen to it somewhere, and I'm going to be like, wow, where's all the low end? Well, you pulled it out because my monitors we're coloring the spectrum with low end. Now, you guys might not have any low end at all, and you wonder why your mixes are bassy. You're putting bass in because it doesn't exist, okay? It's there. It could be your room sucking it up. You have to EQ your monitors for what is called flat response. And if you look at this white line, that's what Arc did to the orange line. This is the fixed improved line, okay? So that allows me to hear everything completely balanced. So when I add low end, it's really adding low end, you see? Or if I'm adding high end, whatever I'm doing, this is what I did, and this allows it to translate. The other cool thing about this, too, is you have virtual monitoring, where you can, like 80s white would be the NS10s that I actually have here, okay? So, this would compensate and allow you to hear your mix using a virtual pair of 80s whites, you know what I mean? And then there's the 90s blacks, which would be the new Yamaha NS10s or whatever, HS10s I think they're calling them now. So you see all the different virtual things you have, desktop, laptop, so you can actually see how you're translating through speakers using the same ones you have, So it was neat to do that, to kind of hear what I was getting. And I'll go through some of the Arc settings so you can hear it. Now, the problem is, when I have Arc engaged, you are hearing my room correction, which you don't want. You don't want to ever export a mix with this thing on. It's only for you to mix through, and when you're done, you disable it and send it out. So that's one of the issues there that you'll have to deal with, is to remember to turn it off. When you're ready to export, because you don't want to put the correction on there. Then your correction's going to go on someone else's speakers. You don't want that. You just want to take it off there. So, but I'll show you how it would change things, and you can hear how it's taking away low end, how it's doing high end. You'll hear just by going through. So these are the monitors that I use here. I have my Adams. I have a set of Logitechs that are just amazing. They're little like gaming speakers. They're incredible. But I arc those too, so you can see what they had. Look at the bump that they had in low end. Now I have a sub for them also. So that's pretty big right there, especially for these speakers. They're like this big, so they sound really good though, and I've always liked the sound of them, and I do switch by and listen. I do like to listen, in a consumer type environment, because I know not everybody has the stuff that, engineers have, and then I have my my NS10s, and if you look at these, look at that was pulling low end out. So you got that bump there, but this is lower in the bump field. This is where your meat usually is, for your low end. So I would mix something on the NS10s, and I'd be, putting all this low end in, because as you can see, it wasn't translating. And then I'd listen somewhere, and it was all mud. They were terrible, So Arc fixed them pretty good. You can see they're still, the line's not perfect, but they sound incredible now, and I'm running them through a sub as well. So, you can get some pretty cool stuff out of this, and this plugin pretty much saved my life and my business. I mean, I was nothing but a pre-production studio, until I got this. It's really helped that drastically, seriously. So if you are a guy or a girl that's, mixing like crazy, and you're constantly tweaking and EQing, this might fix you. Seriously, it was amazing what it did for me. And I'll tell you, I'll share a little story with you. I used to, when I would go to work every day, as I was driving, I'd make a mix the night before. And 30 seconds from my house was this wooded area. And if the mix sounded like crap in that 30 seconds, I threw it out the window like a Frisbee. And this went on for, I don't know, really a long time. And I said to myself, you know what? I got to go and pick all those up. When I get it right, I'm going to go and I'm going to scour them woods, and I'm going to pick up every one of them CDs. I filled a whole shopping bag full of them. I don't know how many there were. I can't remember. I don't know if there was 120 or something like that. But I went and picked up every single one of them. Once I got it down. But I know what it's like to be so frustrated. It's like, really, I worked on this for 8 hours and it sucks. Weeks of that, so I know. But with this, I can get a mix together in probably an hour, even if it's a complex mix. Now, depending on the complexity, 2 hours. A full mix completed, 4 hours, maybe 6. Again, it depends. How many tracks are we looking at? What do I have to do? Is there orchestra pieces in there? Stuff like that. But this thing is the way to go. Or if you've heard of something like it, you definitely want to EQ your monitors for flat. That will stop all the EQ problems. And then, of course, you have to know what to do, how to fix things, and what to listen for, what justifies good sounds. That's very important. Because if you spend, 30 minutes on something, it's probably not a good sound. Unless you're trying to create something. For example, the intro to this song, that, it makes that funny sound. That's a filter that I used from my Antares, I believe. And, I can actually do that with my fractal piece, too. I figured out a way to do it. It has like this vocalizer thing that you can do. But I was going for a special sound that took me a little while to create, so that's different. You know what I mean? You can work on something like that for an hour if you have to, or more, whatever it takes to do it. But when you're trying to record your sounds the right way, you don't want to go too crazy. It either works or it doesn't, and you have to know when to say when, or you'll just waste a lot of time. So real quick, let's just take a look at some of the stuff I did. Most of my processing, all right, these are my effects bins, and that's where you'll see, most of my effects, unless I use something on Pro Channel. If I click on here, right, I did play all the drums that you hear on Tribulations were done with my V-drums, using different drum modules combined. I have probably 3 or 4 snares and kicks, hybrided together, various drum kits, all combined together. You want the crack of one thing, you want the resonance of another. So there's a couple different drum kits going on. Some samples were put along with the drum kits. So that's where most of the processing is. If you look at my kick track, I have a sample replacement here, transient designer, a compressor, and then I used a little EQ on the snare drum. But I mean, I'm not doing anything that anybody else, you know what I'm saying, is doing that's crazy. You always want a little something. You want a little EQ, a little compression. I didn't do anything on my hats, nothing. But they sounded good because they're all being sent to my overheads, where I just took a little high end out of there. It sounded great. Toms, I didn't go crazy with the toms. Look, there's a little bit of EQ on there. I don't even think I compressed them. I didn't, So you don't need to run effects for the sake of running effects. I put an imager on my overheads so I could tighten them up a little bit instead of having them wide. I like to have my drum kit like in the center of the stage, not to exceed a certain pan field, and my instruments on the outside. I don't like when the toms go from hard left to hard right or vice versa, and you got cymbals, everything. That sounds like a disconnected drum kit to me. I like it to be centered and have its place, and everything else goes around it. But if you look at all this stuff, I'm really not going too crazy. Now here's another snare drum that has a lot of, that has the same kind of processing going on. So that's a hybrided snare drum, a different set of room circumstances going there. My bass guitar has 3 effects there, and a little bit of EQ. I'm not going crazy. This was the guitar effect in the beginning that I actually bounced down from something I was playing around. I was like, you know what? I like the way that sounds. I'm not going to use a plug-in because the plug-in would actually make it have a different random sound every time, where I captured exactly what I wanted. I had to keep recording it until it gave me the right sound, because the plug-in would cycle to time. So I got it the way I wanted, and I just recorded it that way. Here's my guitar tracks. These are the rhythm tracks. There's nothing on these at all, but there is. You just don't see it right now, and I'll show you where they are. Lead guitar, I have a few things in here. I have a compressor, a delay, and a stereo enhancer that allows the delay to not be so monophonic. It kind of spreads out the whole tone a little bit, My lead vocal track probably has the most on it, but it's, nothing crazy. I have a Neve equalizer, a Neve compressor, and then there's a vocal plug-in from Sonar on here, a delay, and a stereo enhancer. So, I'm not using anything magical things to make me, sing more in key or anything like that. There was parts where I was a little pitchy, where I fixed some things, but it wasn't, that I couldn't sing the parts. There's times where you're singing for 8 hours, you just have nothing left. So you can fix a little something. I can sing all this stuff live, which I'm doing, actually. I've been practicing with the live band. We're doing these songs. We just added this one, as a matter of fact. So, that's what's going on with my vocals. All my backups, you'll notice there's nothing going on here, right? And if we go down, these are keyboard tracks. I have effects buses, and what if let's I think it's 5. Let's hit 5 and see what happens. Okay, so effects buses are basically, I can take multiple instruments and send them to one bus. All right, which is cool. Like, for example, all the drum tracks that you see. Let's see, how many drum tracks are there? So we have 15 tracks of drums, and I will send that entire drum kit, all right, to a drum bus. So this way, once I have the drums the way I want them, all the fader, everything's right, I can just slide one fader that controls the entire drum kit, inside the mix. Now, I still have control. If I need a little more snare, I can do that. I've done automation. There's automation on some of the stuff. So it's not a problem, to do that. But it's a lot easier. Same with my guitars, my backup vocals. I have like a choir type thing. So this is where most of the effects are, in the buses, But even still, it's not crazy. There's EQs and compression and stuff like that, little special effects. This is the pancakes, the little panner in the beginning when I hit the harmonic. When it goes, and it kind of flies back and forth. Why sit there and do a knob where I can tell this thing, I want you to go to the right, go to the left, and it does it in real time, So, you work smarter, not harder. Time is money, So, and that's about it. I'm not really, doing anything super crazy on anything. Of course, you have your, effects buses that you can run on multiple channels, you know. So, that's it. But let me show you a little bit of what the Arc plugin does when we change it. So you can just so you can hear what's happening, when it changes over. Right? And on my master bus, I have a compressor that just kind of glues the mix together, Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. There was times where I've used that Melodyne, but I didn't use it to fix pitches. What I did was, because I'm only one voice, and you see where you see mellow, that means the track was Melodyned. But what I did was, it has this thing that controls the timbre of your voice. And I changed that so it didn't sound like the same voice singing all the time. I didn't want perfect vocals, because as soon as you do perfect, you don't get that human harmony feel. It starts to sound robotic. So, but what I did was, it's something called a formant. And the formant is really cool because you literally change the sound of your throat and the way that the vocal's coming across. So it still sounds like me, but it doesn't. You know what I mean? So that's how I tried to get it to sound more band-oriented instead of, that's one guy doing the whole thing. He's singing everything. I tried to just change up the backup vocals just a little bit so it sounded like the group or the choir or whatever I was going for, But let's go down to this Arc plug. And so if I turn it off, right, this is the way you guys hear it. Now, when I'm listening to this, it'll sound bassy to me, but you can just hear how it is. And I'll just let this song play and just show you how Arc is changing the way you hear. Now, some of it's going to sound bad because this Arc correction was done for my speakers. And what I mean by correction is they give you a microphone. And you put the microphone, you do symmetrical placements all over your room, okay? And each time you put it in a position, you press a button and it blasts a siren out of one side, blasts a siren, you move it to section 2, 3, 4, and you keep going. And it calibrates to what it hears, and it fixes everything. So it did it to my speakers. So when you're going to hear it, of course, it didn't do it to your speaker, so you're probably going to hear some weird stuff. But you'll hear how on some things you're going to hear more bass, less bass. It's correcting. It's not correcting your side, though. All right, so this is what it sounds like on my end, which should sound just like the record to you guys. So that's pretty much what you get out of that. Pretty neat, huh? I don't know how good or bad that sounded through your speakers, but at least you can hear the changes and the different, sounds that you get. So if you are translating well through all that, chances are you did it right, And for me, having that turned on, it sounds right to me. Of course, every one of those changes sounded good, except the ones that I did down here, because they were actually different speaker sets. But as long as I keep this on the A7s and I go down here and I change to these guys, that's everything that I should hear on my end. You know what I mean? Now, if I would have For example, when I went to the Logitechs or my NS10s, I have a switcher over here that I would switch, and the next set of speakers would switch in. So I'd have to switch that and switch that to get to that speaker, and the same for the Logitechs. I have another switch for them. So as long as I leave this the way it is and, then go through all these, that's, how I passed my judgment on this. So, that's basically what I think everybody should be concerned with. If you're having problems with your mixes and EQs and, you're constantly beating yourself up, this stuff might help you. And always try to get the best sound you can. And if you're not quite sure what that is, it's good to talk to somebody who may know more than you do, or you need to really listen to things that you like and try to, to listen for what you're hearing. For example, it's real fast. Bass guitar normally has less low end in it than you think. So when you're mixing or playing a bass, don't jack the low end up. Listen to that Cult of Personality. I know it's an older mix, but the low end is in the kick drum on that. The bass guitar is actually very clean with not a lot of low end in it. Now, that brings you to another thing you might want to do. On my particular album, my low end was more in my kick drum as well, but I have a trade-off where sometimes the bass guitar and the kick drum would kind of switch, all right? So you either want a meaty kick drum with low end and a bass guitar with less meat, or you want the bass guitar to have a little bit more meat in the low end, and your kick drum can be a little clickier, meaning you don't want that same low end rumble and punch, because then you start walking on the bass guitar and you get frequency crosstalk. You don't want that. So, that's some rules of thumb that I've used, with everything. So if somebody wants that good, like that punch you in the stomach kick drum, you want your bass drum to be a little higher up. So for a kick drum like that, maybe we're going to push 60 hertz or 62 hertz, where our bass guitar we might want at 75 hertz, or maybe 80 hertz we're going to push it. It all depends, what you're looking for and what that sound has in it, ahead of time. A lot of guys say, oh, the first thing you want to do is cut this and cut that and boost. Well, what if the sound doesn't have that in there? That's silly. Don't ever think of starting points. There's no such thing as a starting point. So forget all that, seriously, and I don't care who you are that might be watching this video. If you're, some kind of big producer, I'm sorry. If a sound doesn't have those frequencies in there, you don't cut or boost. It's just the way it goes, So there are no starting points, But you do have to, learn what justifies a good sound, because if you don't, you'll never learn the right way. So you have to keep an open mind and listen. Even guitars have less low end than you think. So, when guitar players, one of the things we do, we sit in front of our amps and we're tone chasing. We come out with this awesome sound and we love it. And we wonder why it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because chances are you probably EQ'd it and you have a cabinet blowing at your knees, right? So you can't even hear what it's doing. You bring that cabinet up to ear level or you put a mic on it, you're going to hear what it's doing. And you're probably going to throw up, right? So you want to be careful with that kind of thing too. Guitar doesn't have a lot of low end in it. It doesn't. And when you play live, that's the first thing the sound man's going to do. He's probably going to cut 80 hertz and below right out of it. Because we don't need 80 hertz in a guitar tone. You don't need 60 hertz in a guitar tone. You can put maybe a little bit of an 80, 90, 100. You don't want to go crazy because now you're stepping on the good meat zone and you don't want to be there. There's just no reason for it, Now, if you do, then something else has to be curbed or you're going to be cross-talking again, frequency cross-talk, and you don't want that, It's even toms. They don't have loads of low end in them. When you hear that, boom, boom, that's usually done in the mastering. That is the sum of all bass. Everything together, adds up. So you have to just be very observant in the way you listen, and you have to hone in on everything. And once you start to get it, you don't have to hone in anymore. As long as you can observe what's going on and make sense of it, you know what I mean, and kind of put it in your mind of what's happening, you usually can do pretty well. But it's repetitive. I mean, it took me a long time to be able to listen to something and say that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, or it's wrong but you don't know how to fix it. See, that it all walks hand in hand. So, but some of this stuff should really help you. I mean, back in the old days, you would have like an EQ, okay, that you would provide, and a guy would come in and he would have a microphone, and he would, like blow like pink noise, just coming through your speakers, right? And he would get a printout of all the frequencies that you were missing, and he would add them in on the EQ that you provided, right? And if there were some that were too hot, like if we look at my arc thing again, okay, the ones that are too high, he would pull that down. So all in this orange area, he would do what you see the white line doing, right? And that's what they did back in the day, and they would put rubber bands on it so you could never, or a piece of glass, or plastic, and put a lid on it so you never touch them settings as long as you're in that same position. ARC is that same principle, where it adjusts your monitors and you're fine. Now, if I move these monitors in any way, I'm screwed. I have to redo the correction again. It's not that bad. It takes about an hour, but it stinks because I got to tape the floor. I have to measure everything. You do everything symmetrically, and but I think it's great, and I think that is the most important thing for me. Without this plugin, I wouldn't have my business. It's the truth. I really wouldn't. You wouldn't have Tribulation sound the way it sounds if you like the way it sounds. That's what helped me make all the decisions that I made. Seriously. And then you play it in your car, you play it all around, and it's like, hey, this thing sounds the same everywhere I play it for the most part. You know that you got it, So keep some of this stuff in mind, and I hope this helps you. And I'm going to get into some playing and some riffs and rhythms and leads and all kinds of stuff. But I figured, let's cover some of this basic stuff, whether you know this or not. It's very helpful, I think. And if you don't know this, it's probably going to be the most valuable advice that you get, this year. All right, so any problems or questions, let me know. I hope you enjoy this video. Click that like button and subscribe, and I'm going to try to keep this going and keep things fresh for you guys. All right, thanks for everything. Talk to you soon. See ya.